And now, Lifestyles Unlimited presents the Real Estate Investor Radio Show. Over the next hour, we unfold your map to financial freedom. You'll learn how to retire through investing in single-family and multifamily real estate. You'll learn how to create cash flow and build wealth so you can have the time and money to live the lifestyle you want.
Hello and welcome to the show. This is Andy Webb with Lifestyles Unlimited. And as always, we're working on your financial freedom. And I'm filling in today for Al on Tell Al Tuesday. Al's still working through those back issues, so hopefully he'll be back with us soon. But I'm in place for now. And I'll tell you, if you're a numbers person, I'm a numbers person. If you've caught any of my prior shows, you may have picked up on that. But if you're a numbers person, I've got a numbers person for you today. I'm going to be joined by a former math teacher. That's right. Started as a single-family investor some years ago, but recently retired early from that math career thanks to his big shift into multifamily investing. And I met this gentleman, it's been a handful of years at the Wealth and Passive Income Expo down in Houston. I don't even remember the year now, but let's get to his story. Mark, welcome to the show. How are you feeling? Congrats on the retirement.
Good. Thank you very much, Andy.
So you're a few months into retirement now. How's that big adjustment going?
I am. I retired in June, and so I'm still trying to figure out exactly what retirement looks like. I've got a couple kids in high school, and so I'm enjoying having a lot of free time and nothing that I really have to get up and do. Sometimes I stay up a little too late. Sometimes I sleep in a little too long, but enjoying it, yes.
Tell us a little bit about what you were doing before, about that math career and so on.
So I started teaching in Southern California. Taught 3 years in a Christian school, then I taught 34 years in public school, mostly math, mostly middle school, 6th grade, 7th grade. This last year I actually had 8th grade for the first time. And so, that was my career, 37 years altogether teaching math and a couple of other subjects, but mainly math. Just
thinking back, what made you jump into real estate back then?
So after I got out of college and I started my teaching career, I was just very interested in the whole idea of passive income, and I started reading a lot of books. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I read, multiple streams of income. I read books like, what was the other one? The Richest Man in Babylon, which is one that Dell talks about from time to time. And I was just interested in passive income, and so I was looking at real estate as a source of passive income that I could use to supplement my teaching income and, give more possibilities for my future and the future of my family.
Okay, so you saw some opportunity in real estate way back then, started investing. At some point, you joined Lifestyles Unlimited. I have a few questions there because you're out in California. When did you join? How did you hear about us, and what was the motivation there?
Well, I had joined originally in 2013. I'd been listening to Dell on the radio, listening to the podcast quite a bit. My main motivation when I first joined was to learn how to better manage the single-family properties that I already owned. So my mom and I had purchased a fourplex back in 2001, and then my wife and I, when we got married, we both had a home, and so we lived in one and we kept the other as a rental. And so I ended up having a total of 7 doors, a fourplex, and 3 single families. And I really had never been trained in any way on how best to manage those, and especially things like tenant screening and those kind of things. So that's the reason I originally joined, to get better at what I was already doing.
Gotcha. So you became a member of what we call the Financial Freedom Program, and that does a lot for new investors that have done nothing before, as well as experienced folks in your situation. I talked to a lot of members that have joined, have your type of experience, and really improve based on the benchmarks, the new operations we show them. If you think back a little bit, it's been a while, but what are some of the big takeaways that you learned as a single-family investor in that program?
One of the biggest ones for sure was tenant screening. I remember hearing on the podcast that, 98 or 99% of the problems you ever encounter with your tenants or your residents is the result of, improper screening, that people don't tend to move into your home or your rental property and then become a problem, or what Dell refers to as a purple Martian. They already have a history. They've already been a problem for previous landlords. And so when I learned how to screen tenants correctly, that was something that I think was very helpful. That's probably the main one right there. And, I was just continuing to manage those homes. I'm sure I picked up other things along the way.
But that's a big one. And I had a conversation recently, a show with Kara, who's in Colorado, Denver. She's investing in Houston in single family. And we talked about due diligence when you buy the property, very important. But this type of due diligence that you're talking about, when you put somebody into that property, you're committing to 12 months, maybe a little bit longer. You want to do your research, and it's out there. You can really learn about people in the age of the internet. So you have these houses, Quad, in California. Were you cash flowing well? I think about California as being a pretty expensive market. Were you cash flowing well? Could you have retired in the long run had you stuck with single family?
Not in California, no. So they were cash flowing enough to pay all the expenses and to give me, some extra spending money, which I typically just kept in an account, but they weren't cash flowing in the way that when we talk about lifestyles, homes in different areas where we tend to buy, which might cash flow $400 or $500 a month at times. They were cash flowing less than that, but of course, what they were doing over the course of these last 20 years is building equity. And so that helped me when I eventually transitioned into, the multifamily through lifestyles.
Okay, and let's make that transition. First question, do you have any of those houses left?
I do not. So the fourplex, which I bought in 2001, sold that right before the pandemic, sold that in January of 2020. And then I had one single-family home remaining, which sold at the end of June in 2022, so this past year. And so I'm very happy that I'm 100% passive now. So I'm not only retired, but I'm not taking any phone calls. And I did that for 20 years, and managing single-family is not that difficult. But it's nice to be 100% passive.
I'm your host, Andy Webb, filling in today for Al Gordon on Tell Al Tuesday, and I'm joined by Mark, and we've learned that Mark is in California, and let's just quickly go through his timeline. 34 years as a math teacher, 37 years in total as a teacher, recently retired, both from the math career as well as from his career as a single-family investor. He started that in 2001, joined Lifestyles Unlimited in 2013 as a Financial Freedom Program member, improved his business, which is great to hear, but then you made a shift. You shifted gears in 2018. Tell us about that, the how and the why. What was the motivation? What did you do?
Yeah, so like I had said, I'd been listening to Dell on the radio, and I'd heard many interviews with, I think probably both passive investors and also lead investors talking about the properties that they, had taken over and improved, and the returns that the investors were getting on some of those properties. And as we talked about earlier, my single-family homes weren't, throwing off a lot of cash flow. They were getting more valuable and they were appreciating. But I got to the point where I thought, wow, this multifamily thing seems pretty interesting, and I want to learn more about it. And I knew I had some debt equity in some of these properties that I wanted to be able to invest. And so decided that it was time to go to a live event, and they were having first they had a Meet Dell event out in Palm Springs, and then a month after that they had the 2-day seminar live. And so I asked my wife if she would come with me, because I didn't want to get too heavily involved in something that my wife didn't really understand. I do most of the real estate, but, we make all of our decisions together jointly. And so we went to the 2-day out in Palm Springs and ended up joining at the end of that weekend as Preferred Investor Group members.
Okay, and for the listener, Preferred is the kind of subsection within Lifestyles that is focused on multifamily, on apartments, and you could be a passive investor like Mark is, you could be an independent owner where you just do your own deal by yourself, or you could be a lead. Why did you choose to go the passive route at the time rather than, say, do a lead or buy your own apartment community?
I think mainly because I was still in the middle of my teaching career, and I wasn't looking back in 2018 when I joined 4 years ago. I wasn't really thinking about retirement quite yet. I needed to deploy some of the money that was in some of these other properties. And the idea of being a passive and, letting people that are experts in running these multifamily apartment communities, invest in them and let them, grow my money and grow my investment. That was very appealing to me because I was already pretty busy. My kids are still in high school, and so I had a full-time job. So I wasn't looking to go and take down my own apartment community. I wanted to be a part with some other investors.
Yeah, and it's great because when you are a part with a group like that, you can actually do much bigger properties, economies of scale. We talk about that at the 2-day. That brings a lot of value. Now, I'm just curious, how many multifamily investments have you chalked up to date?
So currently, I've been in 23 different properties, and 7 of them have sold over the last 2 years. So the first couple of years was interesting because I kept investing, but I was at the beginning of the cycle, and so I was still seeing, my quarterly distributions coming in. But now that I've gotten a little further into the cycle, 3-4 years in, I've had a number of properties do refinances, and like I mentioned, 7 of the properties have sold, and so I've started to see what was sort of theoretical for me at the time. You're going to have these properties, and this is what they're going to do. You're going to end up with these returns. I've actually started to see that happen, and that's been very exciting.
And you're, I mentioned at the start of the show, being a math teacher, I assume you're a numbers guy, right? That would make sense. How analytical, how deeply are you diving into things like the budget and so on as you review these sundry investment opportunities?
Less than you would think.
Really?
I am a math person, and I tend to be more holistic in my view of some of these properties. So, I like to look at who the lead investor is. I like to look at what their track record is. I like to see what the story for the property is, and look at all the details of what they're projecting to happen over the course of the investment. But I'm not really a person that digs into, line item 12B and why does it have this number here and instead of that, which I've heard other people do, and that's just I'm just more of a holistic, investor where I like to look at the big picture.
Yeah, and speaking of big picture, just looking at your geographical spread, you are very well represented across the United States. Was that an active goal to diversify, Georgia, Texas, Arizona, where do I see here, Florida, Tennessee, or was that, going back to your point, more a function of the lead investor that you've connected with?
It was a little bit of a combination of both. I started out, I think the majority of my early investments were all in Texas. And then I got to know people and network with people and ended up connecting with a lot of the leads that are out in Arizona. So then I had a number of investments in Arizona. And then recently, wanting to diversify a little more, Indianapolis, Indiana is one that you didn't mention. But yes, I've gotten into 2 recent deals, one in Tennessee and just my last one in Florida. So I do like to have some diversification across states as well as, just different types of properties and different leads.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I'm curious, I do get this question from people that are considering joining and thinking about going down the multifamily route. They're a little bit concerned. Will I even be able to deploy my capital? Is there enough opportunity out there? What do you see?
Well, it's funny because I asked that question both to Dell when he came out and did his Meet Dell event in Palm Springs, and I asked it again when I went to the 2-day workshop a month later. And I said, I don't mind putting down the money to join this program because I think it's going to be well worth it as long as I'm going to be able to get into deals. Am I going to be able to get into any deals? And I think really my answer to that is there are plenty of deals out there. It does require you to do some networking. You do need to make yourself known to some of the lead investors, some of the syndicators that are putting these deals together. Some of them are very popular, and so if you don't have any connection point with them, it might be a little harder to get into deals with them initially. But the expo was a great opportunity for me to go and meet a lot of the leads in person. And then in Southern California, we have ambassador events where we've invited a lot of the Arizona leads, for instance, have flown over to California and they've come to our ambassador events. And so I got to meet several of those leads in person at those events. And so I really do think it's a function of, the fact that you're out there networking and making connections, and that the lead is going to remember you because you've actually had a little person-to-person contact with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Think about a way when you introduce yourself to make yourself memorable. I happen to be a skydiver. I tend to throw that in. People remember that, or the fact that we're always traveling around the country in the RV bunker. So when you meet these people, do connect. Don't be shy. They don't bite. They want to get to know you too, don't they, Mark? I mean, they're looking to build their portfolio of investors essentially as well. So, but think about ways that you can stand out when you do talk to these folks. We're going to talk about, you mentioned the ambassador program. I want to get to that in the next segment. I also want to hear, we know you've done 17 investments. A few of those have gone full cycle. I want to hear maybe one or two. Think about one or two that you'd like to share with us in the next segment. We're going to take a quick break. That maybe it's still in progress or gone full cycle that you really like, your favorite deals is what I'm getting to. So we'll hear about those when we come back. To the listener, stick around.
Got questions? Call Lifestyles Unlimited at 855-497-4335. The Real Estate Investor Radio Show continues next.
Stop waiting. Stop sitting around. Stop procrastinating. This is your time. Make it happen. Do it now. When's the best time? Now. People go, well, I don't know. It's going to crash. It's going to be better next year. I've got to listen to 4 more classes. I love guys come up to me all the time. I've been listening to you on the radio for 8 years now, right? I go, and you're not rich yet? Well, really, I'm thinking about joining next month. Do it now.
Learn the skills you need to retire with real estate in 5 years or less. Do it now. Register for the Lifestyles Unlimited free online workshop, lifestylesunlimitedworkshop.com.
Welcome back to the show. I'm your host today, Andy Webb, filling in for Al Gordon on Tell Al Tuesday, joined by Mark. Mark is in California. We heard about his history, two decades as a single-family investor. If you missed any part of that earlier show, go to lifestylesunlimited.com. This will be archived there. But Mark, over 2 decades, you realized, hey, I need to shift gears, got into the multifamily space, shed those single families, retired from that space, and are now fully invested as a passive investor across the nation, really. And going into the break, I said, hey, let's hear about, when we come back, let's hear about maybe 1 or 2 of your favorite investments. Maybe they've gone full cycle. Maybe you're still in there. What can you share with us?
Yeah, so out of the 23 deals, 3 of them this year and 1 of them last year in 2021 have returned to me over 100% in usually somewhere between 3 and 3.5 years. But my home run deal, my best deal, which I will share with you right now, was in Arizona. The 2-property portfolio, and that 2-property portfolio was doing very well. And the lead investor decided that he wanted to split the 2 properties up, and he wanted to refinance one of them, which was a newer property, and he wanted to sell the property that was a little older. And so he split those properties. He had to get the permission of the passive investors to split those 2 properties into 2 separate investments. And then he refinanced the one investment, and that refinance returned us about 96% of our initial investment on that side of the 2 properties. And then the second property sold, and it returned 275%. So
wow.
$50,000 in that investment turned into $184,000. So
holy cow! And you're still holding that, half of it.
The one that we sold, obviously we don't have that, but we do have the first half that I mentioned that returned 96% on the return on investment. The best part, the icing on the cake, was that the one that he sold, he was able to 1031 exchange into another investment in Arizona, which meant that our large gain was tax-free, or tax-deferred, I should say. So
his whole investor group in that first apartment community rolled forward into the next investment, essentially. Is that how I would understand that?
Correct. And not everybody did. There were a few people that just said, we'd like to go ahead and, get our return and get the cash and do whatever they had planned with that. But I think the majority of the investors, they said, hey, this investment just did so well. Yes, we want to roll it into the next investment with that same lead investor.
Yeah, and I'm just going to throw this out there. I interviewed Vaibhav as the investor you're talking about back in August of this year, 2022. So to the listener, go give that show a listen. He's got some really good numbers, and he talks a lot about, because he's a lead investor, a syndicator. He's on the other side of the table. Mark, you and I are passives. He's the guy that's out there finding these investments, and he tells you what he does as a lead. So if you want to learn more about what a lead does, that's a good show to listen to. And boy, yeah, he's got some phenomenal numbers. And that 1031 exchange, we talk about that a lot with, if I sell my single family house, I may roll the gains into another couple of houses. But yes, you can do that at a much bigger level with apartments. Again, we're talking economies of scale, big numbers. So this was a big capital gain. It's cash flowing. I'm curious, when you go into your investments as a passive, are you targeting cash flow primarily, or are you targeting capital gains?
I've been open to doing both. I don't really want to limit myself. I'm a retired teacher, so I do have a teacher's pension that if I was living on that if that was my only source of income, I think my standard of living would have gone down, and I would have been a lot more concerned about, do we have enough money to take this trip or to do this or that? I've got two kids that are, going to be going into college in the next few years. But with my lifestyles investments, putting that on top of the pension I already had has allowed me to not only retire probably 2 to 5 years earlier than I would have, but it's given me the confidence to think going forward, instead of, you can retire anytime you want, right? But when you retire, if you only have a certain pile of money and you start eating away at that pile of money, then you're stressed, or you're thinking, hey, I might not have enough money to do this or that. And I wanted to get to the point where I felt like there was an asset snowball that had started to occur, and that the money that I was investing in real estate was going to continue to grow and not diminish as it does so often with people's retirement funds. And so back to your original question, I like getting distributions, regular distributions right up front. But if a value play comes along that's going to maybe give a bigger capital gain in the future, I'm open to that as well.
Yeah, and to the listener, the value play, that might be in some cases, very deep value add, where we're really turning that property around. You may be taking individual units down to the studs for the physical renovations. You may be doing operational things as well. And sometimes those may not pay distributions for 12 months even. I've seen some that are even projecting 24. Now, I'll tell you, our leads, they perform very well, and they often accelerate those. But just looking at the pro forma, looking at the budget, yeah, that's that value play. But you get that capital gain, and then you roll it into the next one. Now, thinking about the 1031 exchange, you experienced that on the apartment investment in Arizona. When you sold your houses, you're taking the money from those houses under your social or your tax ID. Were you able to do a 1031 to roll those into any of your apartment investments?
No, it was not, because they have to be, I believe, under the same tax ID that you have sold under. And so you can't roll a 1031 and take it and put it into an LLC as, one of our lead deals. I could have, if I had wanted to, taken maybe the fourplex and sold that and tried to roll a 4-unit deal into maybe a 10 or 12-unit apartment complex in Texas or another state. But really, that was just giving me something else to manage. And my goal was, as I retired, I wanted to do less managing and not more managing. And so while it might have been a better way to go financially, I probably could have, increased my investments by doing it that way. That was, part of it is the lifestyle, and do you really want to be managing? And if I was, 20, 30 years younger, that probably would have been what I would have done. But being 60 years old and retiring, and I didn't really want to be in charge of a bigger property is the answer to that, I guess.
Yeah, and it's a good point, and I do ask the question because I get that question a lot. Can I sell my houses and roll in as a passive? No, typically not. If you want to roll into your own LLC that you're taking down an apartment community on your own, that can work. There are agents out there that manage that 1031 process. And if you want to learn more, you can also go to our website. There's a search bar at the bottom. Just type in 1031, right? 1031 exchange. There are a lot of shows where we talk about that and where we have the experts on to help you understand that process. It's a great way to save those taxes. But there are times when you would deploy that. But here's the good news, Mark, and I don't know if you experience this, but when you sell one of those houses, yeah, you get that big gain. What do we typically experience on the front end when we get into those apartment investments? Are we, on paper, are we making great winnings, or what's it look like?
Yeah, well, a lot of times what the lead investors are doing is they're going to give you, they're going to take accelerated depreciation, and so you're going to get a big paper loss toward the beginning of the investment. And so when I did sell the fourplex, I do think that my tax burden was lessened quite a bit by the fact that I'd been investing, during that same tax year, I'd been investing in some of these multifamily communities, and they did have, the big write-offs toward the front, and that did lessen my tax burden on those.
Joined by Mark in California. And Mark, to kick off the last segment, I do want to hear about the ambassador program. I think it's a very valuable thing that we do across the nation. You became an ambassador. Can you tell us when that occurred, and what does the program do? To maybe give us an example of a recent event.
Yeah, so when I first went to the 2-day seminar in Palm Springs, I met Steve Anderson, who was one of the first ambassadors, and I'd been listening to Lifestyles Unlimited on the radio and on the podcast for years, but I had never actually had, human interaction with anybody that was a member, let alone anybody that had done multifamily deals. So when I met Steve and got his contact information, he was willing to answer a lot of questions for me, help me to learn about different leads that I might want to invest with, and really was just a good guide for me as a newer member of Lifestyles. And we have now, I don't know how many, 40 or 50,000 members now across the country. And of course, Lifestyles has offices in some of the areas across the country, and they're opening more all the time. But there are many areas of the country where there are a number of investors and members of Lifestyles, but the way that, they get together is through events that are promoted by ambassadors. And so I volunteered to become an ambassador in actually the same year that I joined Lifestyle. So I had been a member for a number of months and was getting pretty involved in getting and investing in a number of properties. And basically what we do as ambassadors is we just help to facilitate events, networking opportunities for members that are living in a certain area to get together and to be able to, converse with other like-minded investors. And so as an example, this past Saturday, the Lifestyles ambassadors in Southern California, there are 4 or 5 of us that have that role in different areas of Southern California. We got together and put on a larger event where we had about 57 people at a nice sit-down restaurant in Dana Point, California, and Lynn Murrow, who's the executive vice president of Lifestyles Unlimited, she flew out from her home to be a speaker at our event, and Madeline Pregine, who is the passive mentor, she also came out from Texas and was on a panel and, presented to Southern California Lifestyles members. And so we put on events, and then other times we'll just have a meal together. And so we'll set up a time to have a luncheon on a Saturday in a certain location. And so a couple of months ago, I organized one in Fountain Valley, California, which is not too far away. And we had about 30 people come together. And again, just an opportunity for us to get together and support each other in our real estate investing and just get to make new friends.
And if I were a fly on the wall at one of these events, what would I hear you guys talking about?
I think a lot of it would be, how long have you been investing? What kind of investing do you do? What lead investors do you like to invest with, or have you had success with? If you're a newer Lifestyles member, just lots of little questions about, how do you actually invest, and maybe, what is the white paper? And, there are just lots of little details that you sort of take for granted after you've been in Lifestyles for a while. And really, there are mentors within Lifestyles that really help facilitate, buying our property. And there are mentors for single-family investors that help you to understand how to run your single family. And so that's not really our role. Our role is really to, like I said, facilitate events and help bring people together. And then we can share our experiences, whether it's as passive investors or whether it's as single-family investors from out of state. But really just talking about, finding out where people are and just sharing our experiences with each other and helping each other just the way that, Steve was able to help me so much at the beginning of my lifestyle's journey.
Yeah, it's about connecting. It's about networking. It's about shared experience. And I think it's a wonderful thing that you guys are doing. Again, ambassadors are across the nation. I had an email, in fact, from a member just the other day in the Midwest was looking for someone. And I said, hey, go out to the portal online. There's a list of ambassadors. Find that one in your area. They're going to be able to maybe have a chat with you and whatnot. So it's a great way to connect and stay informed. Aside from the ambassador program, how else might you connect with others from either Southern California or across the nation? What do you do?
The biggest thing really is to go to the expos. So since I've been a member of Lifestyles, I think there have been 5 expos, and I've been to 4 of them, and I had tickets to go to the 5th one, but got COVID and went through that and had a conflict at work that allowed me not to be able to go to that one. But I love the expos. Again, it's an opportunity to go, and especially if you live in a part of the country where there aren't a lot of members, maybe there's 20 or 30 or 40. When you show up in Texas at the expo and see 4,000 or 5,000 investors, and you go, wow, this Lifestyles thing, this is really a legitimate group that's been around for 30 years and has been helping people to retire early and helping people learn how to invest. And, a lot of people try to do investing on their own, but Lifestyles is just such an incredible organization. The people you meet are very genuine and willing to share. Everybody's trying to help each other to get to the next level. And so, going to the expo, you get to go to different seminars and learn more, but there are lots of events where you just, you meet other people. And especially for out-of-state people, it's a chance to meet the leads that we were talking about earlier. So if you're going to be investing in multifamily properties, having a one-on-one chance to speak to different lead investors. I have lead investors and other friends that I really only see once a year, and that's at the expo. And so after you've gone a couple times, it's just sort of a big reunion, and it's a lot of fun to see all these people again.
Yeah, it's a ton of fun. And just so the listener knows, you can go to our website. I mentioned this, lifestylesunlimited.com, and you'll see a button there now for the expo because that's coming up. That's going to be in Irving, Texas, Las Colinas this coming year, February 15th through the 18th, 2023. Mark, I trust you're going to be there.
I got my tickets.
Talking about the education and the classes, I remember seeing you speak as one of the presenters. It's been a few years. I don't remember what year this was, but I believe it's called the Legacy Panel. It was a number of folks up there that were basically involving their kids in their investing in different ways. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've been doing to help your 2 boys understand what you do as an investor?
Yeah, so I have a boy and a girl. So my daughter is a senior in high school, and my son, Josh, my daughter's name is Katie. My son, Josh, is a sophomore in high school. And really, I've been just trying to expose them to the whole idea of real estate investing and giving them options and showing them that, maybe they don't want to quite follow the same path I did, where I did work in a job for 37 years. Maybe if I would have found Lifestyles 20 years ago, I would have shaved some more years off of that. But I share with them a lot about what I'm doing, the multifamily investments that we're getting into. I've gotten them to go to a couple of events with me. They've never been to a full 2-day yet, but my son went a couple of years ago to one of the introductory workshops. My daughter went to half of the 2-day. And we're also having them invest in our properties, not officially, but if we put some money into a multifamily deal, and let's say they have $1,000 that they've, gotten from somewhere that's in their account, I'll ask them, would you like to invest a little money into our deal and get whatever return we get, they would get as well. And so we've done that a couple of times. Vibo Shah, who we talked about earlier, his great property that I got into, I actually called him up because both of my kids wanted to invest a little bit more, and I said, can I raise my investment just a little bit? And again, it's not an official investment by them, but I raised my investment because both of my kids wanted to put some money into that deal as well. And so my goal for them is just that they see other options. I'm not going to ever force them to, get involved in real estate investing, but I have told them that, if they learn this, that the potential is to maybe they can retire in 10 years. And by the time they're 30, after they get out of college, maybe they will be retired and be able to spend the rest of their lives, just working on those things that they want to work on and not necessarily having to answer to somebody else or a boss or something like that.
Absolutely. I love that word options, and real estate does give you options, and you're giving them a wonderful option. Whether they choose to go that path or not is up to them, of course, but wonderful stuff. I've got my 5-year-old just outside here waiting for me. We're about to go horseback riding, but I'm going to involve him as well, and I love hearing from yourself and others that are involving their children as well. Last question. You've recently retired. What is life like now? How are you spending your time? What are you doing? What's the future look like?
Well, I think, the fact that my kids are both in high school, my wife and I aren't going to pack up and take a trip and, go somewhere for 2 or 3 months like, we might if we were empty nesters or something. But, I just have time freedom now. I have the ability to go do the things that I want to do. I'm reading. I'm enjoying, working on some side projects that I have. I have some different hobbies. I like Hall of Fame basketball, so I do some collecting. My son and I took a trip to the Hall of Fame induction ceremony a couple of years ago. We went to Springfield, Massachusetts, and got involved in that weekend and met a lot of basketball people and those kind of things that are a lot of fun for me. So we have a new dog as well, so that keeps us a little grounded. But I think that there are just unlimited possibilities, and I've had people tell me, don't jump in, commit yourself to too many things early, and so I'm still figuring it out exactly what retirement's going to look like.
But what I'm hearing, we're at the end of the show, Mark. Thank you for sharing. What I'm hearing is lifestyle. It's not the money, it's the lifestyle. Keep it up. Enjoy that retirement. I'm glad you got there, and I look forward to seeing you at the expo next year.
The information and opinions you hear on the Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show are those of the hosts, guests, and callers. The Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show is for entertainment purposes only. Please consult a professional regarding your personal investment needs. Nothing presented constitutes an endorsement, recommendation, offer, or solicitation to buy or sell any product or security.